Okay, so Ethan and I, we were basically two peas in a pod. We'd been inseparable since kindergarten, where we bonded over our shared love of peanut butter sandwiches and playground swings. Growing up, we were the kind of friends who knew everything about each other, our hopes, our dreams, our deepest fears. He was the brother I never had, the one person I could always count on, no matter what. Then the accident happened. Ethan was only 15, a star athlete with a bright future ahead of him. A car crash, a head injury, and just like that, his world went dark. He lost his eyesight, his dreams shattered, his future uncertain. I remember visiting him in the hospital, my heart breaking at the sight of him, his eyes bandaged, his usual vibrant energy replaced by a quiet sadness. But even then, even in the face of such a devastating loss, Ethan's spirit shone through. He was determined, he said, to live his life to the fullest, to adapt, to overcome. And I, being the loyal best friend that I was, vowed to be there every step of the way. The next few years were tough. Ethan had to relearn everything: how to navigate the world, how to perform everyday tasks, how to simply exist in a world that was no longer visible to him. But he never gave up. He learned Braille, he got a guide dog, a goofy golden retriever named Buddy, and he even went back to school, graduating with honors. I was there through it all, reading to him, helping him with his studies, being his eyes in a world that had become inaccessible to him. And somewhere along the way, my feelings for Ethan changed. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something deeper, something more profound. I fell in love with him, with his resilience, his kindness, his unwavering determination. But Ethan, bless his oblivious heart, never noticed. He saw me as his best friend, his confidant, his eyes. He relied on me, trusted me, but he never saw the love that was reflected in my every glance, my every touch, my every word. And then Olivia entered the picture. She was beautiful, charming, and utterly ruthless. She saw Ethan's vulnerability, his dependence, and she exploited it. She wormed her way into his life, becoming his caregiver, his confidant, his wife. I watched in horror as Olivia slowly isolated Ethan from his friends and family, as she took control of his finances, as she manipulated him into making decisions that benefited her and her alone. I tried to warn him, to open his eyes to her true nature, but he wouldn't listen. He was blinded by her charm, by his own dependence, by his inability to see the truth that was staring him right in the face. And so I watched helplessly as Ethan's life spiraled out of control, as he became a prisoner in his own home, a victim of his own blindness, a pawn in Olivia's twisted game. And I, the one person who truly loved him, the one person who could have saved him, was powerless to stop it. Okay, so, Olivia, picture this: sleek blonde hair, designer clothes, a smile that could melt glaciers, and eyes that held a glint of, well, let's just say it wasn't kindness. She was like a character straight out of a soap opera, the kind of woman who could charm the birds out of the trees and the money out of your wallet. She appeared in Ethan's life like a whirlwind, a breath of fresh air, or maybe that was just her expensive perfume. She was a volunteer at the center where Ethan went for his rehabilitation, a kind soul who offered to help him with his errands, his appointments, his daily life. Ethan, bless his trusting heart, was smitten. He was vulnerable, lonely, and desperate for connection. Olivia, with her practiced charm and seemingly endless patience, was like a lifeline. She started small, offering to read to him, to accompany him on walks, to cook him dinner. But gradually, her presence became more and more pervasive. She was always there, always helpful, always offering advice, always in control. She started managing his finances, just to make things easier for him, she said. She convinced him to sell his apartment and move into a more accessible house, which conveniently was in her name. She subtly discouraged his friends and family from visiting, claiming he needed peace and quiet to focus on his recovery. I saw what she was doing: the subtle manipulation, the gradual isolation, the way she was weaving her web around Ethan, trapping him in her golden cage. I tried to warn him, to point out the red flags, but he wouldn't listen. Sophia, he'd say, his voice gentle but firm, You're my best friend. I trust you. But you're wrong about Olivia. She loves me. She cares for me. She'd never do anything to hurt me. But Ethan, I'd argue, my frustration growing, she's controlling your money, isolating you from everyone, and what, Sophia? He'd interrupt, his voice laced with a hint of annoyance. She's making my life easier. She's taking care of me. She's giving me something to live for. Hey, I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see the truth. But I couldn't. He was blinded by his dependence, by his trust, by his own desperate need to believe that someone, anyone, could love him in his current state. And so I watched helplessly as Olivia tightened her grip on Ethan's life, as she chipped away at his independence, his confidence, his very sense of self. She was like a parasite, slowly draining him of his life force, leaving him a hollow shell of the man he used to be. She'd whisper in his ear, planting seeds of doubt about his friends, his family, even me. They don't understand you, Ethan, she'd say. They pity you. They see you as a burden. But I see you for who you truly are. I love you, Ethan. I love you for your strength, your resilience, your beautiful soul. And Ethan, starved for affection, for validation, for someone to see beyond his blindness, would believe her. He'd cling to her words like a lifeline, oblivious to the fact that she was the one drowning him, slowly and methodically, in a sea of lies and manipulation. Okay, so watching Olivia weave her web around Ethan was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I knew it was going to end badly, but I couldn't seem to stop it. I tried to warn him, subtly at first, dropping hints, asking questions, hoping he'd catch on. Ethan, I'd say casually, have you noticed how much Olivia's been spending lately? Those designer bags, those fancy dinners? It all adds up. He'd shrug, oblivious. She works hard, Sophia. She deserves to treat herself. But she quit her job, remember? I'd point out. And she's always borrowing money from you. She's just helping me manage my finances, he'd say, his voice defensive. It's easier this way. Easier for who, Ethan? I wanted to scream. Easier for her to drain your bank accounts, that's for sure. But I couldn't push too hard. I knew Ethan. He was stubborn, proud, and fiercely loyal. The more I questioned Olivia, the more he'd defend her. It was like she'd cast some kind of spell on him, blinding him to the truth. So I changed tactics. I started gathering evidence. I snooped around their house when Ethan was out. Don't judge me. It was for his own good. I found credit card statements with exorbitant charges, hidden bank accounts in Olivia's name, even love letters from his business partner, the sleazeball. I confronted Olivia once, cornering her in the kitchen while Ethan was upstairs. Olivia, I said, my voice low, dangerous. I know what you're doing. I know you're stealing from Ethan, lying to him, cheating on him. She just laughed, a cold, cruel sound. You're pathetic, Sophia. You're jealous. You've always been in love with Ethan, but he'll never choose you. He needs me. He depends on me. And you're just a nuisance. You're going to regret this, Olivia, I warned, my voice shaking with anger. I'm going to tell Ethan everything. Go ahead, she sneered. He won't believe you. He trusts me. He loves me. And you'll just be the crazy ex-best friend who's trying to ruin his happiness. And she was right. When I tried to show Ethan the evidence, the credit card statements, the love letters, he just brushed it aside. Sophia, he said, his voice weary. I don't know why you're doing this. Olivia loves me. I trust her. I'm not going to let you poison my mind against her. My heart sank. He was so blind, so trusting, so utterly under her spell. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, a sense of helplessness that I couldn't shake off. I knew I had to do something, but what? I couldn't force him to see the truth. I couldn't fight Olivia on my own. I was trapped, just like Ethan, in a web of deceit and manipulation, with no way out. The tension between Olivia and me grew thicker with each passing day. She'd glare at me, her eyes filled with venom, her smile a thinly veiled threat. I'd glare back, my own anger simmering just below the surface, my determination to save Ethan hardening into a cold, hard resolve. I knew I was running out of time. Olivia was getting bolder, her schemes more reckless. I could feel the danger closing in, the sense of impending doom hanging over me like a dark cloud. And I knew deep down that if I didn't do something soon, something drastic, we were both going to end up as casualties in Olivia's twisted game. Okay, so the tension between Olivia and me, it was like a coiled spring, ready to snap. I knew she was getting desperate, her control over Ethan slipping. My warning starting to plant seeds of doubt in his mind. She had to silence me, permanently. It happened so fast. One minute I was leaving Ethan's house, my heart heavy with worry. The next, I was being shoved into a dark alley, Olivia's face contorted with rage, her eyes glittering with malice. You just couldn't stay out of it, could you, Sophia? She hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You thought you could ruin everything for me? I tried to fight back, to scream, to run, but she was too strong, too quick. She grabbed me, her nails digging into my skin, her grip like iron. Ethan loves me, she spat, her breath hot against my face. He needs me. And you're nothing. You're just a pathetic, jealous friend who can't stand to see him happy. He's not happy, Olivia, I managed to gasp, my voice trembling. He's being manipulated. He needs to see the truth. She just laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. The only truth he needs to see is that you're gone, she said. And then she pushed me. A hard, brutal shove that sent me tumbling backwards, my head hitting the pavement with a sickening thud. Pain exploded in my skull, a blinding, searing pain that made me gasp for air. I looked up at Olivia, her face a blur, her features distorted by hatred. She stood over me, her silhouette outlined against the dim alley light, her expression triumphant. If only you could see her for what she really is, I thought, the words echoing in my mind, a desperate plea, a final warning for Ethan. If only he could see her lies, her manipulation, her cruelty. If only he could see the truth that was right in front of him, the truth that I had tried so hard to show him. My vision blurred, the world around me fading into darkness. The pain in my head intensified, then slowly subsided, replaced by a feeling of numbness, of nothingness. I could hear Olivia's footsteps, her hurried retreat, the sound of her heels clicking against the pavement, growing fainter and fainter. And then silence, a cold, empty silence that was more terrifying than any scream, any pain, any darkness. It was the silence of death, the finality of it all, the end of everything. My last thought, a silent plea, a final message for Ethan, lost in the void, unheard, unseen, forever trapped in the darkness with me. Okay, so death. Not exactly a 5-star experience. One minute I'm thinking about Ethan, wishing he could see Olivia for who she really is. The next, blackness. Nothing. Just a big, empty void. I was pretty sure that was it. Game over. The end. Except then I woke up. Not in some angelic afterlife surrounded by clouds and harps. Nope. I woke up in my bed. My old bed. The one in my apartment, the one with the mismatched throw pillows and the stack of unread books on the nightstand. Huh? I mumbled, my voice raspy, my head throbbing. I sat up, blinking, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The room was exactly as I remembered it. The familiar scent of lavender and old paper filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the... Wait a second. This wasn't Grandma Rose's house. This was my apartment, the one I'd had before Olivia, before everything. I scrambled out of bed, my legs shaky, my mind racing. I rushed to the bathroom, my reflection staring back at me from the mirror. It was me, all right, but younger, fresher. Before the stress, the worry, the death. I looked around the bathroom, taking in the familiar details. The chipped ceramic sink, the slightly crooked towel rack, the collection of bath bombs I'd gotten for my birthday. It was like stepping back in time, like nothing had ever happened. But something had happened. I remembered it all. Olivia, her manipulation, Ethan's blindness, my warnings, the alley, the everything. It was all there, vivid and clear, a series of memories that felt both recent and distant, like a nightmare I couldn't quite shake off. I walked downstairs, my heart pounding, my senses on high alert. The apartment was quiet, the air thick with the scent of coffee. I hadn't made coffee. I don't even drink coffee. I pushed open the kitchen door, and there he was, Ethan, sitting at the kitchen table, a steaming mug in his hand. Buddy, his guide dog, lying patiently at his feet. He looked up. His face, well, it was Ethan, younger, more relaxed, less haunted. "Sophia," he said, his voice warm, familiar. "You're up early. Sleep well?" I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. He was real. He was here. He was alive. And I was here too, back in my old life, back before. "Ethan?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He chuckled, his eyes, those beautiful, sightless eyes that I loved so much, filled with amusement. "Of course it's me, Sophia. Who else would it be?" I rushed over to him, my arms wrapping around him in a tight embrace. He hugged me back, his familiar warmth filling me with a sense of disbelief. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice muffled against his shoulder. How is this possible?" He patted my back gently, his smile softening. "I don't know, Soph," he said, "but I'm glad you're here. I was just making coffee. Want some?" Coffee. He was making coffee, like everything was normal, like I hadn't just died. I pulled back, my eyes searching his, looking for some explanation, some clue, some sign that this was all real, but his eyes were filled with nothing but warmth and normalcy. And then it hit me. Deja vu. That feeling of having experienced something before, of reliving a moment in time. I'd been given a second chance, a chance to go back, to change things, to make different choices, a chance to save Ethan and myself. "Ethan," I said, my voice steadier now, a sense of purpose beginning to form in my mind. "What? What day is it?" He looked at me, his brow furrowed slightly. "It's October 27th, 2022, Soph. Why?" October 27th, 2022. A year before, the alley, a year before, Olivia. I took a deep breath, my mind racing, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and determination. This was it, my second chance, my opportunity to change the future, to protect Ethan, to make sure that if only you could see her for what she really is, wasn't my last thought, but a reality. And this time, I wasn't going to just warn him. I was going to make him see. Okay, so October 27th, 2022. 1 year to change everything. No pressure, right? But this time, I wasn't going to play the naive best friend, the concerned confidant. This time, I was playing chess, and Olivia was about to be checkmated. My first move, knowledge is power. I needed to know everything about Olivia, her finances, her connections, her weaknesses. Luckily, I had a year's worth of memories to guide me. I remembered her secret bank accounts, her shady investments, her affair with Ethan's business partner, Mark. Ugh, that guy. I even remembered a particularly nasty incident involving a stolen inheritance and a forged signature. Olivia, honey, you really need to work on your criminal skills. Next, I needed to protect Ethan. He was vulnerable, trusting, and completely oblivious to the danger he was in. I started subtly, planting seeds of doubt, dropping hints about Olivia's spending habits, her manipulative behavior, her general lack of character. "Ethan," I'd say casually, "have you noticed how much Olivia's been, well, around lately? Don't you think it's a bit much, even for a newlywed?" He'd frown, his brow furrowed. "She's just being a good wife, Soph, taking care of me." Sure, I'd say, my voice light. "But she's practically glued to your side. Doesn't she have, like, a life of her own?" He'd shrug, dismissing my concerns. "She's dedicated, Soph, that's all." Dedicated to draining your bank account, more like, I'd think to myself. But I couldn't push too hard. I had to be subtle, patient, like a gardener carefully cultivating a seed of doubt, waiting for it to blossom into full-blown suspicion. But the real game changer? The eye surgery. I remembered reading about it. a groundbreaking experimental procedure that had a high success rate in restoring vision to people with optic nerve damage. It was risky, expensive, and still in its early stages, but it was Ethan's only chance. His only chance to see the truth, to see Olivia for who she really was, to see me. I started researching, contacting specialists, pulling strings, and a few favors to get Ethan on the list for the surgery. It wasn't easy. Olivia was constantly monitoring his appointments, his emails, his every move. But I was smarter, more resourceful, and I had the advantage of foresight. I created a fake email account posing as a medical researcher, offering Ethan a place in a revolutionary new study for vision restoration. I knew Olivia would be suspicious, so I planted false leads, fabricated evidence, and even created a fake website for the study. Thank you, internet tutorials, and my surprisingly good Photoshop skills. And then, the sabotage. I knew Olivia wouldn't let Ethan go through with the surgery. She needed him blind, dependent, controllable, so I anticipated her every move. I knew she'd try to discredit the doctors, to bribe the hospital staff, to even, well, let's just say I wasn't taking any chances. I hired a private investigator, a real one, not the kind you see in movies, to keep an eye on Olivia, to document her every move, to gather evidence of her interference. I also had a backup plan, a second team of specialists on standby, ready to perform the surgery at a moment's notice should Olivia try to pull anything. This was war, a silent, invisible war, fought in the shadows with Ethan's future, his happiness, his very life hanging in the balance. And I, Sophia, the girl who used to bake cookies and braid hair, was the general, the strategist, the one who would stop at nothing to win. Okay, so the surgery. It was D-Day, H-hour, the culmination of months of meticulous planning and a whole lot of nail-biting on my part. I felt like a general orchestrating a complex military operation, except instead of tanks and fighter jets, I was dealing with scalpels and lasers. Less dramatic, but equally nerve-wracking. The fake email, the fake website, the fake research study, it all worked perfectly. Olivia, bless her overconfidence, swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker. She was too busy trying to discredit the study and sabotage the researchers to notice the real doctors, the real hospital, the real surgery that was happening right under her nose. Ethan, bless his trusting heart, was completely oblivious to the elaborate deception. He just knew that there was a chance, a slim chance, that he could see again. And that was enough for him. He was excited, hopeful, but also understandably nervous. I stayed by his side the whole time, holding his hand, offering words of encouragement, trying to project an air of calm confidence that I definitely didn't feel. Inside, I was a mess of anxiety, my mind racing with a million what-ifs. What if the surgery failed? What if Olivia found out? What if I was wrong about all of this? But I couldn't let my doubts show. Ethan needed me to be strong, to be his rock, just like I always had been. So I put on a brave face, smiled, and told him everything was going to be okay, even though I was secretly praying to every deity I could think of. The surgery itself was agonizing. Not for me, obviously, but for Ethan. He described it later as a firework display behind his eyelids, a chaotic explosion of light and color that he couldn't interpret, couldn't understand. It took hours, long, tense hours where I paced the waiting room, my nerves frayed, my heart pounding like a drum. Finally, the surgeon emerged, his face tired but optimistic. The surgery was a success, he said, his voice reassuring. But it will take time for Ethan's brain to adjust to the new input. He'll need therapy, training, and a lot of patience. But he should be able to see. Relief washed over me, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for tears. This was the time for celebration, for hope, for finally showing Ethan the truth. I waited impatiently for him to wake up, for the bandages to come off, for him to see. I imagined his reaction, the look on his face when he finally saw the world again, when he finally saw me. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I was so close to achieving my goal, to exposing Olivia, to freeing Ethan from her grasp, to, well, to everything. But I knew I had to be patient, to wait for the right moment. The timing had to be perfect. One wrong move, one slip up, and everything could fall apart. So I waited, and planned, and prayed, and hoped, and dreamed of the moment when Ethan would finally open his eyes and see everything. Okay, so the moment of truth. The bandages came off, and Ethan blinked, his eyes adjusting to the light, his face a mixture of wonder and confusion. It was like watching a newborn discover the world for the first time. Everything new, everything strange, everything overwhelming. Whoa, he breathed, his voice hushed with awe. It's so much. The hospital room, once a familiar space defined by touch and sound, was now a riot of color and shape. The sterile white walls, the bland furniture, the sterile equipment, it all seemed to assault his senses, a cacophony of visual stimuli that his brain struggled to process. I watched him, my heart pounding, my own emotions a mix of joy, relief, and a touch of apprehension. How would he react? Would he be happy, confused, overwhelmed? He turned his head slowly, his gaze sweeping across the room, finally landing on me. His eyes widened, a flicker of recognition, of something else crossing his features. Sophia, he said, his voice hesitant, unsure. It's me, I said, my voice soft, reassuring. It's really me. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, his fingers tracing the outline of my face, as if confirming that I was real, that I was there. You're, he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. Beautiful? I offered, a playful smile tugging at my lips. He chuckled, a shaky, uncertain sound. Yeah, he said, his voice husky. Beautiful. The next few days were a whirlwind of adjustment. Ethan's brain, starved of visual input for so long, struggled to make sense of the world around him. Colors seemed too bright, shapes too sharp, movements too fast. He'd squint, blink, and sometimes even close his eyes, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of it all. But gradually, slowly, he started to adapt. He learned to recognize faces, to distinguish objects, to navigate his surroundings without relying solely on touch and sound. He rediscovered the beauty of a sunset, the intricate details of a flower, the subtle nuances of a smile. And with each new discovery, with each new sight came a wave of emotions: joy, wonder, gratitude, but also sadness. Sadness for the years he'd lost, for the experiences he'd missed, for the things he'd never been able to see. He looked at Olivia, his wife, his caregiver, the woman he'd trusted implicitly, and he saw not the loving, devoted partner he'd imagined, but a stranger with a calculating glint in her eyes, a forced smile on her lips, a mask of deception that he could now see through, clear as day. And he looked at me, Sophia, his best friend, his confidant, the woman who'd always been there for him. And he saw not just a friend, not just a caregiver, but something more. Something he hadn't been able to see before. Something that was now undeniable now that he could finally see. Okay, so Ethan's eyesight was back, but his world had been turned upside down. He was seeing things, really seeing things, for the first time in years, and what he was seeing was disturbing. Olivia, the woman he'd trusted with his life, the woman he thought loved him unconditionally, was starting to look less like a devoted wife and more like a con artist. It started subtly, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes when he'd mention his friends, the ones she'd subtly discouraged from visiting, a forced smile when he talked about his family, the ones she'd claimed didn't understand him, a possessive hand on his arm when he spoke to other women, even just the nurses at the hospital. He'd catch her in little lies, inconsistencies in her stories, details that didn't quite add up. She'd claim she was tired, stressed, just forgetful. But the nagging feeling in the back of his mind wouldn't go away. It was like a tiny pebble in his shoe, irritating, persistent, impossible to ignore. Then came the finances. He'd always left the money management to Olivia, trusting her to handle everything. But now, with his restored vision, He could actually see the bank statements, the credit card bills, the discrepancies, large sums of money missing, unexplained expenses, purchases he didn't recognize. He confronted her, his voice hesitant, unsure. "Olivia," he'd say, holding up a credit card bill, "what's this charge for? I don't remember buying a diamond necklace." She'd stammer, her eyes darting away. "Oh, that," she'd say, her voice high-pitched. "It was a gift for you. A surprise." "A surprise?" he'd repeat, his brow furrowed. "But I don't remember you giving me a necklace." She'd shrug, her smile tight. "Well, it's coming. It's being resized." He wouldn't push it. He wanted to believe her, to trust her, to cling to the image of the loving, devoted wife he'd created in his mind. But the doubts were growing, festering like a wound. Then there was Mark, his business partner. Ethan had always considered Mark a close friend, a trusted colleague. But now, he'd catch them whispering together, exchanging glances, sharing inside jokes that excluded him. He'd see Olivia's hand lingering a little too long on Mark's arm, her laughter a little too bright, her attention a little too focused. One evening he came home early from a meeting, something Olivia had strongly discouraged him from doing lately, and he heard them, their voices muffled but clear, coming from the living room. "How much longer do we have to keep up this charade?" Mark's voice said. "Just a little longer," Olivia's voice replied, laced with impatience. "Once we've secured the deal, we can finally be together. And Ethan? He'll never know what hit him." Ethan froze, his blood running cold. He couldn't see them, but he didn't need to. He knew what they were doing. He knew the truth. Olivia wasn't just managing his finances. She was stealing from him, betraying him, planning to leave him penniless and alone. And Mark? He wasn't just a business partner. He was something else. Ethan stumbled back, his hand flying to his chest, his heart pounding in his ears. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The lies, the inconsistencies, the subtle manipulations, all clicking into a horrifying picture. He'd been so blind, so trusting, so utterly and completely fooled. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him, a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a deep gut-wrenching pain. He'd trusted Olivia, loved her, believed her every word. And she'd repaid him with lies, deceit, and a betrayal so profound it shattered his world. He stood there, in the shadows, his vision blurring with unshed tears, the weight of his blindness, both literal and metaphorical, crushing him. He'd been blind to Olivia's true nature, blind to her manipulation, blind to the love that had been right in front of him all along. And now finally, he could see. And what he saw broke his heart. Okay, so the revelation about Olivia, it was like a punch to the gut, a betrayal so deep it left Ethan reeling. But amidst the anger and the hurt, another realization dawned on him, a truth that was even more painful, more profound, more devastating. Sophia. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years, not just as his best friend, his confidant, his eyes, but as a woman, a beautiful, intelligent, compassionate woman who had always been there for him, through thick and thin, through darkness and light. He remembered her smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, the gentle touch of her hand on his arm, the unwavering support she'd always offered. He remembered her voice, reading to him, comforting him, challenging him. He remembered her scent, a subtle mix of lavender and something uniquely Sophia that he couldn't quite place. He remembered the arguments too, the time she'd tried to warn him about Olivia, her concern evident in her voice, her frustration barely veiled. He'd dismissed her concerns, brushed them aside, blinded by his own trust, his own vulnerability. He'd chosen Olivia over Sophia, blinded by a love that was ultimately a lie. And now he saw the truth. He saw the love that had been there all along, the love that Sophia had so freely given him, the love he'd been too blind to see. He saw the sacrifices she'd made for him, the unwavering support she'd provided, the quiet devotion that had been the constant in his life. He remembered the way she'd look at him, her eyes filled with, what? He'd thought it was just friendship, concern, loyalty. But now he saw something else. Something deeper, something warmer, something that made his heart ache with a pain he'd never known before. It was love. Undeniable, unconditional love. And he'd been too blind, too foolish, too wrapped up in his own darkness to see it. The guilt was overwhelming, a crushing weight that settled in his chest, making it hard to breathe. He let her down, pushed her away, refused to believe her, even when she'd shown him the evidence. He'd chosen Olivia, a viper in his midst, over Sophia, the one person who truly loved him. Okay, so Ethan's guilt? It was palpable, a heavy cloud hanging over him, a constant reminder of his blindness, both literal and metaphorical. He knew he had to talk to Sophia, to apologize, to try to explain something. He wasn't sure what, but he needed to say something. He found her in the garden, tending to the roses, her movements graceful, her presence calming. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "Sophia?" he said, his voice hesitant. She turned, her expression unreadable. "Ethan," she replied, her voice neutral. I need to talk to you," he stammered. She nodded, gesturing to a nearby bench. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past hanging heavy in the air. "I know," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I was blind, not just literally, but emotionally. I didn't see. I didn't see what was right in front of me." Sophia remained silent, her gaze fixed on the roses. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for not believing you, for pushing you away, for everything." Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision, ironically. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know. I needed to tell you. I see you now, Sophia. I see everything." Sophia finally turned to him, her expression softening. "I know, Ethan," she said, her voice gentle. "I know you do." The conversation was long, emotional, and cathartic. Ethan poured out his heart, his regrets, his guilt, his newfound understanding. Sophia listened patiently, her expression a mix of compassion and something else. Forgiveness? Maybe. But also a quiet strength, a self-assuredness that hadn't been there before. And then it was Olivia's turn. The final showdown. Sophia and Ethan confronted her together, the evidence of her crimes laid bare, the stolen money, the forged documents, the affair with Mark, everything. Olivia, cornered and desperate, tried to deny everything, to twist the truth, to play the victim, but her lies crumbled under the weight of the evidence, her carefully constructed facade shattering into a million pieces. "You can't do this to me!" she shrieked, her voice shrill, her eyes filled with panic. "I'm your wife, Ethan. I took care of you. I loved you." "You didn't love me, Olivia," Ethan said, his voice cold, hard. "You used me. You manipulated me. You stole from me. And you tried to kill my best friend." Olivia lunged at Sophia, her nails outstretched, her face contorted with rage. "You did this!" she screamed. "You ruined everything!" But Sophia was ready. She'd anticipated this move, prepared for it. She sidestepped Olivia's attack with ease, her movements fluid, confident. She grabbed Olivia's arm, twisting it behind her back, pinning her to the ground. "It's over, Olivia," Sophia said, her voice calm, unwavering. "Your game is up." The police arrived, Olivia was arrested, and the truth finally came out. The full extent of her crimes, her manipulation, her greed, her ruthlessness was exposed for everyone to see. In the aftermath, Ethan was devastated, heartbroken, and filled with a profound sense of shame. He'd been so blind, so foolish, so easily manipulated. He'd trusted the wrong person, pushed away the right one, and nearly lost everything in the process. Sophia, on the other hand, emerged from the ordeal stronger, more resilient, more self-assured than ever before. She'd faced her past, confronted her betrayers, and reclaimed her life, her truth, her power. She'd shown Ethan the truth, not just about Olivia, but about herself, about the love she'd always carried for him. And now she had a choice to make. Ethan, finally seeing her for who she truly was ready to offer her his heart, his love, his everything. But Sophia had learned a valuable lesson. She'd learned that her worth wasn't defined by anyone else's love, that her happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. She'd learned to love herself, to trust herself, to choose herself. She looked at Ethan, her heart filled with compassion, understanding, and a deep, abiding love. But she also knew that she couldn't just fall back into their old dynamic, the one where she was the ever patient, ever supportive, ever loving best friend, waiting for him to finally see her. Ethan, she said, her voice gentle but firm, I forgive you. But that doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. I've changed. You've changed. We both have a lot to figure out. He nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. He knew she was right. He knew he had to earn her trust, her love, her forgiveness, and he was willing to do whatever it took. Sophia smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face. She'd faced her past, conquered her demons, and emerged victorious. She'd reclaimed her life, her power, her self-worth, and now she was ready to embrace her future, on her own terms, with or without Ethan. She was free, and that, she realized, was the most powerful, most liberating feeling of all.